Jalen Brown is coming off his best postseason yet, took his team to the finals or helped take his team to the finals. We do have to understand he is not the main guy on this team from a defensive perspective. Every defense that the Celtics play are game planning for Jason Tatum first, which allows Jalen Brown to get more freed up. And me, as a Jalen Brown sympathizer and maybe a slight Jason Tatum doubter, I do have to be unbiased and aware of that fact. However, we cannot ignore that when Jason Tatum got completely locked up in the NBA Finals this year, it was Jalen Brown that was keeping them in games, that was being the main guy, stepping up, being the number one, carrying his team to an extent. Now, Jalen Brown is also a better defender than most of the guys on this list. He is helped out by surrounding players on his team because he is far from the best defender on his team. However, even if he wasn't, he is still a guy that can guard a lot of good players. I think that when he gets matched up with star players on both ends of the court, he has no fear in making a play and playing how he would play against anybody else. He would never shy away or shrink in big moments. It's not a tendency that I see from him. Incredibly talented scorer, 3 levels, can get it from deep, mid-range, and he gets to the basket. Explosive in the lane, super athletic obviously, powerful, great strength. Yes, his handles can be a little bit of a weak point, especially I don't even think it's necessarily his handling ability. It's just what he's deciding to do with the ball, like dribbling into a double team, just trying to force stuff and just not being an amazing passer, natural playmaker. That might hurt him a little bit, and that's probably why he's not in the top 3 on this list. But I still have to give him that respect, putting him in the top 5, because I do think he's just a dog. In any given matchup, he does think he can be the best player, and he always performs when it comes time to the playoffs. I've never really seen him underperform in a series. Of course, we have to acknowledge the level of help that he has. He is on a great team, and when you're on a great team with great players, they do help mask your deficiencies, and that is a thing that probably is the reason why he's not in the top 3 in the end. But I did flirt with that idea for sure. Number 4, I got Bradley Beal, and another reason why this list is so hard is because we have guys like Bradley Beal who we have not seen in a high competition, high intensity, playoff type atmosphere scenario or playoff atmosphere. I mean, besides that one first round series against Philly, the previous year, not this previous year, but the year before, 2021 NBA playoffs. He had some good games, and he had some tough games. I mean, you really look at that series, it was like him and Russ. And after that, it was really bad. Like, they had to do literally everything for their team. The Wizards have done a terrible job of building teams around him is number one thing that we have to acknowledge. You look at him play this year, last year, the year before. I mean, the guy has pretty much no help or support. He's got to do everything himself. And that's probably why we see so many times he scores 45, 50 points in the game and they lose. It happens all the time. He literally has to be the guy. And some people might call him a ball hog, but you gotta just look at the guys he's playing with. He's gotten some high assist games, and actually he did become more of a playmaker last year. I think he was a lot more of a playmaker and less of a scorer, and I don't know if that helped his team win a lot of games. I think with a guy like him, he's an extreme talent on the offensive end. He's gonna make the right play. For most of his career, the right play was shooting the ball, and you could see why. He averaged 30 points a game, doesn't make the all-star team, doesn't win a lot of games. It's hard to chalk that up to anything, but his team's not good enough. And I don't know if his team's going to be good enough this year, but the pure talent is there. You know the guy can get 50 points in a game, 40 points in his sleep, handle the ball like a point guard, and make plays. He's a better playmaker than most of this list. Like, he's a better playmaker than everybody on this list so far, besides DeJounte Murray and maybe Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Probably goes overlooked a little bit, but it's also a lot harder to get assists when you're playing with a bunch of guys that aren't that good at scoring the basketball. So, I don't know. I put him at 4, and he could be higher, but we just haven't seen him that much. It's hard to say, hard to gauge. You know, there are certain guys that they're in the playoffs each year, and they deliver each year. And they're a constant to be on that big stage and to be that guy on that big stage. And that's why number 3, I have Donovan Mitchell. Now, this might be a little bit controversial. I don't know. I mean, I think he was pretty disappointing last year. I don't know how much that has to do with if he's getting worse or if he was just really dissatisfied and almost disinterested in the prospect of playing for a championship last year at the point where it really seemed like they had no shot because of whatever beef was going on in their locker room, but also just because they completely fell apart as a team after being like one of the favorites in the preseason to win a title, and also being a number 1 seed last year in the playoffs, disappointing against the Clippers team that lost Kawhi Leonard, and you couldn't win after that happened. So we do have to acknowledge those blunders, but blunders will happen. If you play in the playoffs, you win some, you lose some, right? Not everyone can be a champion. You have to lose sometimes. I don't think he's really gone out sad until this year, probably. Like, this was the worst, and it wasn't because he choked or folded or anything. I think it was just because he just kind of gave up. Like, his defense, I don't think he's ever been an amazing defensive player, but his defense in the Dallas series was pitiful. It was almost an insult to the sport. So maybe it doesn't make sense why he's so high on this list, but I don't think he's like actually one of the worst defenders in the league. I think if he's really locked in, he's played a lot of playoff series. He has to do everything for his team. Like, Mike Conley is injured, or last year, I guess he just wasn't that much of a factor. Jordan Clarkson, never know what you're going to get from that guy. Outside of that, those are the 3 guys that are going to be handling the ball for your team. And Donovan Mitchell's got to, like, score all your points. Bojan Bogdanovic is a good scorer, but you got to get him the ball, and he's not going to give you more than 20 on a given night, probably. It's hard for me to believe that Rudy Gobert shouldn't be touching the ball at all. I know that he's not a talented offensive player. It's not pretty when he gets the ball, I can tell you that much, but guy's 7'2", standing under the basket, he should be open for a roll, lob, dunk, whatever. I mean, I don't know how great of a team player Donovan Mitchell is. He kind of does seem like the, put it all on my back, let me carry us home. And that's just not how you win a championship in the NBA. The Jazz, there was only been 1 year they were a 1 seed and they really had those expectations. They've had other years where they win a series in the first round. I think they did it twice, lose in the second round, but they're like a 4 or a 5 seed. So they don't have the expectations to go to the conference finals. So I can't really get mad at him for that, and that's like his first 2 years in the league, right? I don't know, maybe I'm getting confused. I do know that in the bubble he was unbelievable. It is a lot of a hero ball mentality, and that's kind of the shooting guard position for a lot of cases, a lot of these guys. Like, you could say Donovan Mitchell doesn't pass the ball enough, but is he really worse of a playmaker, worse of a guy to have on your team than a Jalen Brown or even a Bradley Beal? Anthony Edwards, I mean, he's not exactly a prolific passer, a super willing pass-first playmaker. Like, a lot of these guys, they're explosive scorers, but if you play with a point guard that's going to feed you the ball, you might not look like as much of a ball hog, right? Donovan Mitchell, his team wasn't really constructed in a way where he could just sit around and wait for the ball to get to him. I've seen him come onto the court in playoff games, just be the best player on the court so many times, just be a completely unstoppable force. Like, he has the dog. It seems like he's just got a different gear, and that three-point shot gets a lot better. Let's move on to number 2. I had Devin Booker, probably the best mid-range scorer in his class of shooting guards. Maybe got the best footwork, him or number 1 guy, but he got his team to the NBA Finals, that playoff run. I know there were some asterisks, Kawhi Leonard. They definitely don't win that series if Kawhi is playing. But we just got to see how much of a killer he was. And even getting to the finals, having back-to-back 40-point games, like, he was a total problem. The only reason he's not number 1 probably is because of that game last year in Game 7. The fact that Devin Booker is going to come out, not only did he flop in Game 6 of that Mavericks series, he flops in Game 7. That's the type of game that will move you down this list by itself, regardless of whatever else happened. But yeah, you flop in Game 6, you flopped in Game 7 too. You complained about double teams in the offseason that one time, and it has been your worst nightmare in the NBA because they brought the double on you in that game. Had no idea what to do. Devin Booker is one of the better playmakers among top shooting guards in the NBA. We did see him come and play point guard when Chris Paul got hurt in that later stretch of the season last year, and he was pretty good, but like the elevation on his jumper, even if he's not the most explosive, quick guard in the league, like he can just get his shot over you. The footwork, like I said, it's amazing, just creating space, shooting fadeaways, those moving mid-range shots, and also the level of post game. Jumper is as smooth as they come. Totally complete scorer. And he had an MVP campaign last year. I don't know if maybe he was in the top 5 for candidates, but he was definitely an MVP candidate by the end of the year, and for good reason, being a big part of how his team was able to win, 64 games. So yeah, great regular season performance, but yeah, I just get docked a little bit for that Game 7, man. Game 6 and 7. Number 1, we got Paul George. Paul George has had some blunders over the years, and he's had some injury issues. From a standpoint of best overall player, who I want on my team in a given day, I think I'm taking Paul George, just because you look at when Kawhi goes out, and he has to be the number one guy. He can step into that role and be the only star on his team. Second best player is Reggie Jackson. That's your second offensive option. Clippers have never really had the center, and Zubac being their starting center might have been a problem for them. Obviously, the wing depth is great, but there's no stars there. Like, Marcus Morris is your best wing player outside of Paul George. So you look at him in that Suns series, and he had a great series. I think he really had to win people over when Kawhi went out. In that Jazz series, everybody writes them off, and he leads his team to victory twice in a row. I know one game was the Terrence Mann game for sure. Paul George in that game 5 of that Utah series completely redeemed himself and getting to that next round playing a loaded Suns team that in a really close series that went to 6 but totally could have gone the other way. Yeah, he did have some bad moments down the stretch. I don't know if he's the most clutch player. And in fact, he's not been clutch at all in a lot of situations, like the killer instinct and just does he have the dog in him in that moment? I don't know. There are some questions, and that's why it is valid to argue some other guys in this list over him. But from a complete player perspective, from size, strength, ball handling ability, playmaking vision and ability, defensive ability, what is his team asking of him? Like, think about the games Kawhi isn't playing and where he's able to take this Clippers team as a number one guy. Obviously, he's a great shooter, and obviously his handle is unbelievable. He can get anywhere he wants on the court just with finesse and so many moves. Yeah, the footwork, unbelievable for a guy of his size. But then you do still factor in the defense. Even if he's not guarding the main guy on the other team every game, he is still a plus defender, great passing lane guy, going to get a lot of steals. And offensively, carrying the whole load, being a playmaker. Like, I think his team just asks so much of him, and he generally will deliver. Swap him out with a Devin Booker on the Suns. Put him with great players around him. Swap him out with a Jalen Brown on the Celtics. Great players around him. I think he probably helps those teams more than those guys do. When Kawhi comes back, the Clippers should be a favorite, as much of a favorite as anybody to win the NBA Finals. So I'm going Paul George at number 1 in this list. Previewing the 2022-23 NBA season. Call me a casual in the comments because I know you got mad at this list for whatever reason. We can't all agree. And yeah, let me know what your list would have been. So that's all.